Good afternoon, everyone. This is Andy Reese with Department on Disability Services. As always, I'll start by sharing our current data. There we go. So today is April 30th. We've ended this month with to date 428 people who have tested positive for COVID-19, which I was hoping we'd be lower than our lowest months since the beginning. Unfortunately, we were at the same level as we were in September and October. We had 2 additional people test positive within the past week. In anticipation of the one question, I did look, and for both of those people, they were people who had said that they were not ready to be vaccinated yet. So someone had spoken with them about vaccination. We'd offered it to them, provided education, but in both instances, unfortunately, they had declined. They are both, they do, neither of them is seriously ill with COVID. One of them, in fact, is asymptomatic and only got tested because of an exposure. So, by placement type, the 2 people that were added this week, one was in a host home and the other was in their natural home. So the totals would be year to date, or since the beginning, 8 people in host homes, 114 in intermediate care facilities, 1 in a mental health facility, 56 in their natural home, 2 in a nursing home, 4 in out-of-state placements, 37 in residential habilitation, and 206 in supported living. So overall then, in terms of intermediate care facilities, there was no change this week. So that represents about 38% of people in intermediate care facilities who have contracted COVID. Of those who have died, and it's been a confirmed COVID deaths, there have been 12, which represents about 10.5%. In natural homes, it was 1 additional person, so that's 56 people. Of those, 5 have died, representing just about 9%. In residential habilitation, it is still 37 people, which represents about 34% of people in residential habilitation who have contracted COVID. And of those, 2 were confirmed COVID deaths, which represents a death rate of 5.4% for those folks. In supported living, 206 people, which is no change from last week. And of those 206, there are 15 who have died where it's been confirmed as a COVID death, representing about 7.3%. So overall, there have been 428 people, which is just about 18% of the people supported by DDA who have contracted COVID. And of these, 36 have been confirmed COVID deaths, which represents 8.4%. Of those 428 people, 55 have died, representing a total of about 12.9%. So in April, there were 2 in supported living and 2 in natural homes. As I indicated, there were 6 total. The other 2 were in host homes. People who required inpatient hospitalization, inpatient treatment of COVID. In April, there was 1 person who required inpatient treatment, and as of today, there are no people supported by DDA who are receiving inpatient treatment for COVID-19. People who have died who have had COVID, the total is 55. Of that 55, 12 have been confirmed as not COVID related, and for 7 of them, we are still awaiting confirmation from the respective office of chief medical examiner of DC or Maryland to confirm the cause of death, which gets us to a total of 36 people who have had a confirmed um, COVID-related death. And in April, there have been none. And amongst provider staff, we had just one person test positive in the past week. So there's been a total of 686 provider staff who have tested positive. 50 of these work for more than one provider, and 10 provider staff have died from COVID. People may be aware the mayor issued an updated order this week, which I had open, but in my haste to close everything, I may have closed that window. I think most importantly, for our purposes, um, this mayor's order will end the stay-at-home order for people living in ICFs, but I want to get the exact language for you, um, because what it does essentially is ends the stay-at-home order for people living in ICFs, uh, and defers any ongoing restrictions to guidance that will be issued by DC Health. And if So I'm going to pull up just so that I can tell you exactly what the language is. I think that will be helpful. And DC Health, we expect within the next few days, will be issuing guidance for people in ICF so that it will clarify um, what that updated guidance is, particularly. And I can go over that for people. Because I expect there will be distinctions made based on folks who have been fully vaccinated. And those numbers amongst the people we support are actually um, are coming along quite well, quite frankly. Within intermediate care facilities, 96% of the people there um, have either one or two vaccinations so far. Within residential habilitation, it's 92%. Within supported living, it's at 78%. Um, within natural homes, it's over 50%, but still lagging behind a bit. And that is where I think we have the concern. People may be aware that the mayor this weekend will be doing an outreach to get people um, to to go into the community to talk to people about getting vaccinated. And so I will be with her in Ward 6 at a recreation center there. Um, and so I thought that since I would be in that neighborhood, I would take a look at in that neighborhood people we support and where we stand in terms of COVID vaccinations. And what I saw was a a number of folks who live with their families where the family is saying, we're not quite ready for vaccination yet, um, which is a concern to me. I mean, at the same time, within natural homes, we have had only 6% of the folks who have tested positive so far. So families have, representing only 56 people out of about 930 who we've supported in natural homes. So, families have done a good job of protecting their family members. However, there is this vaccine out there that provides an extra layer of protection for all of us. And our hope, of course, is that as many people who are able will get that vaccine, because the reality is not only does it provide an extra layer of protection for the person who gets it, but if we're all vaccinated, then we begin to see a reduction in the community spread of COVID-19. And that's where we make a real difference in terms of our ability to return to normal. So, speaking of returning to normal, we had talked before about the changes in phase two. Things are opening up a bit next week. You can, on coronavirus.dc.gov, read the whole 12-page mayor's order. What I will say is all restrictions for congregate care facilities and residents will be specified in guidance issued by DC Health. So the section of the mayor's order that continued the stay-at-home order was repealed. That was in Mayor's Order 2020-075 last year. That's been repealed and it is replaced with those restrictions will be specified in guidance that will be issued soon, very soon, I expect, by DC Health. So that folks in intermediate care facilities, just like the rest of us, can begin to, especially those who are fully vaccinated, get out, be out in the community safely. Requirements around face covering, the requirements for staff, I don't expect to change. Anyone who has noticed, I have actually noticed, even though the CDC changed the guidelines regarding face coverings while you're outside, when I walk to the metro, the people I see walking on the street are still wearing face covering. And certainly once you get in the metro, you are considered inside and so should have a face covering on. But as I said, that updated guidance should be available soon from DC Health, and that will spell out the changes that can be made for people, and particularly changes that may apply for folks who are fully vaccinated, which I'm glad to see we're moving right along with a nice percentage of people being fully vaccinated. We, just so you know, we have providers update us every 2 weeks, so there's no real update with our provider vaccination rates. So we were last week at, I think, of people fully vaccinated at 42%. So next week we'll be able to provide an update. I see that it says no one is speaking. That's because I've spoken. I've said about all I have to say. I hope that you heard everything up until about 12:20 or so. And if there are questions now, people could type those questions in the chat. Please remember to type the questions where it says to everyone. The other thing I'll just mention while we have a longer than expected pause is that we will be starting now to try and think through what will this look like as we move forward. Um, Not just thinking about post-COVID, because post-COVID could take longer to get here than we want, but also just as we start thinking about moving forward, um, I think that this Friday has been an excellent opportunity to hear from people. Um, but it's also an excellent opportunity where generally we have, like today, over 200 people here together. And so if there are thoughts about how we could better structure this, provide opportunities for more sharing of information rather than giving of information, um, more of a dialogue. It's hard to have a dialogue with 200 people. But if people have thoughts about how we might establish this as an ongoing conversation that we have, but maybe some suggestions about different ways to do it so that it is more interactive and that we have the opportunity to benefit from what we can hear. I mean, we've been fortunate to have DC Health join us every week, but we'd also benefit from hearing more, I think, from the experiences of our providers, from the experiences of people we support in the community. Um, and how can we um, sort of organize this in such a way that we can all benefit from each other's knowledge and experience? So there is a question, which is a really good question, because I was thinking about, frankly, thinking about this question this morning. So I will throw it out because I'm hoping it's a question for everyone, since it says to everyone. What do you think community organizations could do to enhance DDS's efforts to educate people about the vaccine and support people to get it? Because one thing I will say is the vaccine is available now. So we really, I don't believe, have issues about access to the vaccine. When I got off the metro last night, I was at a CVS and I saw where you can, with the QR code, schedule your vaccination with a CVS. Um, you know, within the district sites starting next week. There is a list on coronavirus.dc.gov where people can walk in to get a vaccine. There will no longer be scheduling of vaccines there, but it will be walk-in. So the vaccine is becoming available. So it really isn't an issue of how do we overcome um, the hesitancy in the remaining 30 some percent of the people that we support who are not yet ready to get a vaccine. And we would love to hear thoughts about that. Does the mayor's order mean that people in ICFs can start returning to day programs? The mayor's order means that DC Health will issue guidance very shortly on the restrictions that will apply to people living in ICFs. And so I expect, as I said, I expect that guidance will come out very shortly before we meet next week, and then we'll be able to review it again and answer questions that people may have at next week's meeting. Someone asked how they apply, and I'm not clear apply for what. So if they could type more of that, more into that question, that would be helpful. And the one thing I will say, I think that part of the effort this weekend by the mayor is to get community members into the community to talk to their neighbors about the vaccine. Because the important thing is, I think that in terms of the folks who are remaining, who in terms of folks who are remaining, who are still hesitant, who, in some instances where it says no, it doesn't say no, never, it says no, not yet. And so those kinds of conversations are probably better had with people they trust who may have felt the same way, who can understand kind of where they are and, identify what their concerns are and how to help them overcome those concerns. If all persons are vaccinated, can they go on vacation? I expect that will be addressed in the guidance that will be issued very shortly by DC Health. I am glad to see someone has volunteered. They will be participating in the day of action. Um, and and we hope that others will too. Is there any Appendix K update? Only that CMS responded to us with questions. We have provided responses to those questions to DHCF, which they will be providing shortly to CMS.
Ask about weapons.
Can DC Health provide a timeline as to when the new guidelines will be available? I mean, DC Health might say something more specific, but very soon. There's there's an approval process for these things, so I don't expect that DC Health can give a specific date, but if they know of one, they could please share.
Hi, Director Reese, it's Nelson. You're correct. It is soon and very soon. We anticipate the adult day program guidance may lag a little bit, only maybe a week or so behind the rest of the guidance, but it's going to be very soon.
The other thing I can say, and Winslow may be able to fill in some details here, sorry to put you on the spot like that, is that we have started, and I noticed when I was looking that in fact it has begun. We had provided a list to DC Health of folks who needed someone to come to their home to administer a vaccine. And in fact, that has begun. It was to begin this week, and it has begun. The number of people who needed it delivered to their home was not that high.
That's correct, Dr. Reese. We began scheduling this week. By we, I mean DC Health has begun scheduling this week. They're the ones who have taken on the at-home administration.
And the number was no more than 30, wasn't it?
It was approximately 30 people.
Right. And I did just happen to note in one person's record, for whatever reason, I was looking today, the administration of it has begun.
That's a good sign.
Right. Just to remind people, if you want to send something to everyone, make sure that you say everyone, because what defaults is often all panelists. So I'm just reminding people, Health and Joy has their monthly Zoom party. The last Friday, that would be tonight at 6 o'clock. A person asked, how do you address individual concerns about the vaccine not yet having gone through the full medical trials and that the vaccine is only approved for emergency use authorization? And I'll defer to any health person about how they would answer that question, because I do think the vaccine has been shown to be safe and effective. But if Winslow or perhaps Daryl or Nelson can provide more detail about how you respond to people who are still concerned that the vaccine isn't yet fully approved, but is approved for emergency use authorization.
When Dr. Shaw of DC Health addressed this issue at one of our scheduled forums, his general answer was the fact that the vaccine had gone through all of its clinical trials, and that the way he described it is it has gone through all of the white coats, meaning the doctors and the scientists, and that it hadn't gone through the suits, which is the bureaucracy that is government. So from a scientific perspective, the vaccine is safe according to the scientists and physicians.
I will also add, we had a another clinical champion kind of talk about this, which is, whenever someone expresses concerns, whatever the reason may be, to just to one, acknowledge that it's a valid concern or that it's a valid concern to them, and then follow it up with what Winslow just very well stated, and that and maybe even follow up with how many individuals were in the study, and how many individuals have already received a vaccine. It's actually quite a large number of individuals. So, and that's all I would have to add.
And I know someone shared last week that I thought was really helpful, a document that they share with people, which is from a doctor who says why I'm getting the vaccine. And she, in fact, talked about initially being hesitant. And I thought she provided good information to address some of that hesitancy. Because one of the things she said was this concern about the length of time that the vaccine's been out there. What I was just reminded of was that with vaccines, if there's going to be a side effect, it usually occurs within just 2 or 3 weeks, I thought was her answer there. But whoever shared that last week, if you could share it again, I found it to be very helpful.
And Director Reese, I don't know if this will be helpful, but I know that the FDA released a really nice short YouTube video explaining what an EUA is, because maybe that might be a point of confusion. I can share that YouTube link in the chat as well.
That would be great. Someone asked that we repeat the answer regarding vacations. The answer is that there isn't an answer yet, that the answer will be included. I expect those kinds of questions to be responded to in the guidance that will be issued very soon by DC Health. So it doesn't seem like we have a lot of questions today. Just as a reminder, or to repeat, DC Health will be issuing guidance, and so I am inviting them right now, expecting that they'll be able to provide us a summary and answer questions about that guidance on our call next Friday. So I expect there may be far more questions next week as that guidance is released, exactly what the meaning is. Although we certainly hope that the guidance itself, which will be posted on coronavirus.dc.gov, and that we will send out to everyone once we receive it, will be clear enough that it answers the questions, but will also be available to provide any clarification needed. So someone is just saying, please make sure when the vaccination is given in a natural home that all procedures and guidelines are followed, such as the 15-minute waiting period, that an appointment card is provided. I mean, as Winslow said, this is being coordinated by DC Health, done by a contractor, administered, I expect, by a nurse. And I'm quite confident, making sure that when they provide in-home care, providing care in the community is not new. There are a lot of community-based nurses who have done this kind of work. So thanks for those reminders, but I would certainly expect that those are the kinds of things that people who provide home-based care are very careful about. Someone saying that their parent was not offered this for the individual. To watch the person for 15 minutes? So we will follow up with DC Health about 2 questions. I don't know if Karen's here today or if she could respond to this. We will follow up with DC Health about 2 questions. One is anyone getting the vaccine should be getting that card. So I would expect they're issued those cards. And on the back of the card is your next appointment date. Currently, DC Health for the vaccinations provided in people's homes is using the Moderna vaccine. And so there does need to be a follow-up appointment. So we will make sure and follow up with DC Health about those follow-up appointments, as well as that the person administering the vaccine is observing the person for the required 15 minutes, or how they are handling the required time after administration of a vaccine to ensure that the person doesn't have any immediate side effects. So thank you. For people who are online, there are 2 links that have been provided by DC Health of helpful links regarding the vaccine. Once this ends, they're not there anymore. That's why I was saying you might want to, if you're interested, download those now, because it does appear that we don't have more questions. It's 12:43.
Director Reese, a question came into me privately. Excuse me 1 second. Good afternoon. During the last forum, ICAR recommendations talked about cohort and policies. Can someone please elaborate a little further?
Daryl, do you know what that's about?
Or Karen? Karen's also able to unmute.
Yeah, but this was it was not either of them that talked about it.
Yeah. Kirk, can you repeat their question, please?
Sure. During the last forum, tele-ICAR recommendations talked about cohorting policies. Can you please elaborate a little further?
Oh, okay. Yes. So last provider meeting, my colleague Andrea Coker provided some cohorting recommendations, probably, or talked about cohorting as one of the things that we noticed during our tele-ICAR visits with the ICF providers. And I guess I can ask a clarification: does this individual want us to kind of go over our recommendations for cohorting those that are isolated versus quarantined in a home in an ICF setting? And I'm happy to go over that if needed. Or if they have a specific question, I'm happy to answer that as well. The term is, I think I just got question. The term is cohorting, which with a COHORTING. They asked whether it's cohorting or cohorting. It's not hoarding, it's cohort. So I don't know if they had any questions about how to cohort those that are positive or symptomatic versus those that are quarantined. But I will say that, for ICF settings, we would still want those that are experiencing symptoms or and those that are positive and confirmed positive should be isolated to the room by themselves. If those who are experiencing symptoms but are waiting their test results, for example, are not yet confirmed COVID, we also want them to isolate from other individuals in the home. Those who are directly exposed to an individual who is positive, who are under quarantine queue for questioning whether or not they will develop COVID, should also be in a private room, and transmission-based precautions for COVID should be followed for all those individuals. And when they leave their room, if they need to, let's say, to go to the bathroom that is shared, they should be, if possible, wearing a mask and making sure that there's no other residents or individuals in the ICF around them when they go to that bathroom or have to leave their private room. And these are those for individuals who are quarantined, who are isolated because they're positive, or are waiting a test result and they're having symptoms. I can clarify more if there's any more specific questions on cohorting individuals in those settings.
So there's a question, how is DDS planning to solve the problem where a person wants the vaccine, but their parents are not in agreement? Can I punt to you on that, Winslow? It's probably not an unusual circumstance at all where a person is, and maybe our rights discussion should expand to include these kinds of examples. It's not unusual at all, a circumstance where a person wants something or doesn't want something, and their family wants something different.
Yeah, the question would need to be if the person is able to make decisions on their own. And if the person's making decisions on their own and has the capacity to make those decisions, they should be allowed to accept the vaccine. I believe that if the person or anyone who's advocating on behalf of the person would share that with the service coordinator, we would be more than happy to have our health and wellness team assist and discuss and educate the family. But it is certainly the right of the person to have the vaccine should they have capacity to be able to make their own healthcare decisions.
I'll just, so Carol Grigsby shared, hopefully the family members and everyone on the team would want to support the person's decision. That is the hope. I mean, in all the decisions that people make, that would be the hope, that the team is there to support the person in carrying out the decisions that the person makes in their own life.
Just so it's clear, there's also some tools. This is Mark back. There are some tools at our disposal to the extent we need to go in and help support that whatever decision is made. It's not that somebody gets to say no or veto somebody's decision. So there are a lot of things that we would look at specifically, going back to what Winslow said, looking at their capacity to make decisions, whether there are substitute decision makers in place, and are they in fact applying substitute decision making appropriately in that circumstance. So those sorts of things really ought to come back through to the service coordinator so that we can get involved with the service planning and coordination team to make sure that that person's wishes are put into place.
And very importantly, also, Tina from Quality Trust for Individuals with Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities shared that they have advocates who are available to assist if needed.
And one of the things that we do, it's Mark again, to the extent there are advocates necessary, we have on many occasions reached out to both Quality Trust and Disability Rights DC to make sure that there are advocates in place to assist. So thank you, Tina.
So each time I say it seems we don't have any more questions, that's when, the questions come in. But it's 12:53. So if in the next 2 minutes no questions come in, we will then end the call at 12:55. See? A suggestion at a future session, it might be helpful to hear from some of the providers who've been more successful at getting staff vaccinated if they are prepared to share. I agree absolutely. One of the things I'll say is, while the overall vaccination rate, and this is vaccinations completed, is at 42%, I think I shared last week, this range goes from 0, which is very concerning, to a good percentage of our providers who are above 70%. And I think I provided the exact numbers of providers that are above 70%. So, and we did in fact have some of our providers at a provider leadership meeting share with other providers about their success in getting their staff vaccinated. Because as I say, there are some providers, a small group, that are at least rounded up 100%, including providers that are, not that small, 200 staff. And of providers, 80% and up, there are 10 of them, including a couple of providers that are like mid-sized providers with 45 staff, for example. And they have 80% of their staff fully vaccinated. So we certainly do have, and this is why I was saying we need to figure out how we can figure out ways that we can benefit from the experience and the knowledge of everyone on this call. Because we have a lot of experience out there and folks that have figured some things out. In the same way, we have some providers who, amongst the people they support, have some really high numbers. And, figuring out how to boost that number would be helpful as well. Because while those numbers of the people we support who've been vaccinated look strong, we still have some areas where it could be stronger. Okay, it seems we don't have more questions, so seems we're up for a beautiful weekend. Um, I do hope that some folks will be able to um, join the community and other community members in the event tomorrow morning um, to help get people out so that we can talk to our neighbors about getting vaccinated so that in the district we have a higher vaccination rate and we move toward, um, you know, completely reopening life back as we knew it before. And so have a great weekend. As I say, you will be seeing updated guidance before our next meeting from DC Health. And you can find that on coronavirus.dc.gov as well. It will be posted on our website and we will push it out in addition to that. So people should be looking for that and we will be available to provide a summary and answer questions about it next week. So have a great weekend and I will talk with folks next week.